Hello, I'm Gail. My daughter-in-law slapped me in front of the whole family and demanded my house keys. I never imagined this could happen, but she was relentless, manipulative, and ready to tear my life apart. But instead of giving her what she wanted, I handed her the eviction notice. Can you guess what happened next? The drama only escalated from there. Hook 2. I've been living in silence for far too long, sacrificing everything for my family, only to watch them tear me down. After years of being mistreated, I was done. When Sylvia slapped me and demanded my house, I snapped. I gave her an eviction notice instead. But this isn't just about a house. It's about a battle for respect, power, and family loyalty. What happens next will shock you. Combined. Hook. Hello, I'm Gail. After years of being manipulated, my daughter-in-law slapped me and demanded my house keys. But instead of backing down, I handed her the eviction notice. That moment changed everything. But this isn't just about a house. It's about power, betrayal, and a fight for respect. What happened next? You won't believe it. Stay tuned to see how far this family drama goes. The ballroom was buzzing with energy, an elegant mix of laughter and clinking glasses, the soft strains of a string quartet providing a serene backdrop. People floated around, dressed in their best, exchanging pleasantries, their voices blending with the soft hum of conversation. The chandeliers above sparkled, reflecting the warm glow of the evening, casting a golden hue over the faces of the guests. It was supposed to be a perfect day, my son Harlan's wedding day. But as I stood there, my heart felt heavy, as though I were a stranger in my own family's celebration. I watched as Harlan, in his crisp tuxedo, beamed with joy, holding his new wife's hand. Sylvia, beautiful, poised, and every bit the woman I had tried so hard to accept. It wasn't the wedding I had imagined. Sure, there was love. I could see it in their eyes. But there was also something else. A distance. A barrier between us that had only grown since Sylvia entered the picture. As I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, I couldn't help but think back to the days when it was just Harlan and me. I had raised him on my own, and though life had been tough, I had always believed in the value of family. I'd spent years sacrificing, doing everything I could to make sure he had what he needed, putting his needs above my own. I'd always been the one who was there, in the background, offering support. But somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible, replaced by Sylvia. The thought stung, but I pushed it away. Today wasn't about me. Today was about Harlan. Today, I was supposed to celebrate his happiness. I was proud of him, of course, but there was a hollow ache inside me that I couldn't quite fill. It wasn't just the wedding, though. It was everything that had come before, the long, quiet years of trying to fit in, to feel accepted in a family that felt more like a distant memory than a reality. Then, Sylvia appeared before me, her eyes cold, a thin smile on her lips. She stepped into my space, and the joy around us seemed to fade into the background. "Mom," she said, her voice as sharp as her gaze. "I need the keys to the apartment. Harlan and I need more space now that we're married. It's time for you to move out." The words hit me harder than any slap could have. I blinked, unsure of what was happening. This was supposed to be a happy day. Why did she have to do this now? In front of everyone. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the fury and the frustration bubbling over, but I held it in, as I always did. "I've lived there for years," I replied, my voice steady but tight. "That's my home, Sylvia. I'm not ready to give it up." She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into something that barely resembled a smile. "Well, we're married now, and we need the space. You can't expect us to just—" She paused, eyes flickering with disdain. "Keep living around you, can you?" The tension in the air was palpable. My thoughts raced, my heart pounded. How dare she? How could she speak to me like that? After everything I'd done for this family, after all the sacrifices, this was how I was treated, like a burden to be discarded. I took a breath, the words forming in my mind, but before I could speak, Sylvia's face twisted in anger. Without warning, she slapped me across the face. The sound of the slap echoed in the ballroom, and for a moment, everything stopped. The music died, the conversations halted, and the room went still. I could hear nothing but the rush of blood in my ears, the sting on my skin. The room was silent. Then, whispers. Eyes turned toward me, some faces filled with shock, others with discomfort. But no one stepped forward. No one came to my defense. My son stood across the room, his face blank, his gaze avoiding mine. I crouched down to pick up my glasses, now shattered on the floor. My heart felt like it had cracked along with them. But it wasn't the slap that hurt. It was the betrayal. The realization that this moment, this humiliation, was the culmination of years of being ignored, dismissed, and mistreated by the one person I had tried so hard to accept. I couldn't stay in that room. Not anymore. I stood up, slowly, wiping my cheek. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't care what anyone thought. All I could think about was getting away from this moment, from this life that had turned so cruel, from this family that had turned its back on me. I walked out of the ballroom, my chest tight with shame and anger. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it couldn't chill the fire that was growing inside me. I took out my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Carlos. He was the only one I knew who could help me regain control of my life. "Carlos," I said, my voice low, "I need you to come to the wedding venue. I need those papers. It's time. Make sure no one knows what you're bringing." He didn't ask questions. Carlos never did. I could hear the reassurance in his voice as he told me, "It's time. You've waited long enough." I hung up the phone and stared into the distance. There was no turning back now. I wasn't going to let Sylvia or anyone else push me around anymore. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I was done being their doormat. It was time to take control. I stepped out of the ballroom, the door closing behind me with a quiet thud. The cool evening air hit my face, but it did little to cool the fire building in my chest. I could still feel the sting of Sylvia's slap, burning not just on my skin, but deep within my heart. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it was impossible. My hands were shaking, my thoughts racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The world inside that ballroom had gone silent when the slap landed. The moment I'd been trying to avoid for years had come, and now there was no turning back. I wasn't just humiliated. I was broken, shattered in front of everyone I had once called family. But somewhere deep inside me, a spark of defiance began to grow. I wasn't going to let this be the end of me. I couldn't. I walked away from the door, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. There was only one person who could help me regain control, someone who knew me better than anyone else. Carlos. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number, my fingers pressing the keys with more force than I intended. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. "Carlos," I said, my voice a little shaky, but the determination was there. "It's time. I need you to come here, now." His voice on the other end was calm, reassuring. "I'm on my way. Stay strong. I've got your back." I didn't need to say anything else. Carlos had been my friend for years, a confidant who had seen me through the darkest times. He knew the family secrets, the things I had buried deep inside me, and he also knew that I wasn't the weak, passive woman I had once been. I wasn't going to let Sylvia, or anyone else, walk all over me anymore. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, letting his words wash over me. He was right. I had always been strong, even when I didn't believe it myself. I had kept my family together for years, sacrificing everything for them, and now it was time for me to take back what was mine. It wasn't just about the apartment or the keys. It was about my life, my dignity, and my right to be treated with respect. "Thanks, Carlos," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. "I'm done being their victim." I hung up the phone, the weight of the decision settling in my chest. As I stood there, I realized that I had no choice now. This wasn't just about one slap or one family argument. It was about me reclaiming my power, taking control of my life, and showing Sylvia and Harlan that I wasn't going to be pushed around anymore. I looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling above me. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was still light, and I was going to find it. Back inside the ballroom, Sylvia was basking in the aftermath of her victory, her smug expression telling me everything I needed to know. She thought she had won, that she had put me in my place. Harlan was by her side, but he wasn't looking at me. In fact, he wasn't looking at anyone. His eyes were fixed somewhere off in the distance, his expression blank, as though he were trying to ignore the whole situation. "Did you see that?" Sylvia murmured to him, her voice laced with satisfaction. "I told you she'd never stand up to me. She's nothing but a doormat. We're better off without her." Harlan didn't respond, just nodded, his eyes still far away. Sylvia pressed on, clearly enjoying the moment. "We don't need her anymore, Harlan. It's time to cut ties. It's for the best." Every word she spoke made my stomach churn. It was clear she was trying to manipulate him, using my actions as an excuse to drive a wedge between us. And Harlan? He was buying it. The anger surged within me again, sharper now, the frustration boiling over. Sylvia was trying to take everything, not just the apartment, but my son, too. And Harlan? He was too weak to see through her lies. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him awake, but I knew it wouldn't help. Not now, not after everything that had happened. He had already made his choice. Outside, Carlos finally arrived. His car pulled into the parking lot, the headlights cutting through the dark. He got out of the car with the kind of quiet confidence that I needed right now. As he approached, I could feel a shift in the air. Carlos was no stranger to my family's drama. He had been there through the worst of it, offering a steady hand when I needed it most. And now, he was the key to unlocking the next step in my life. He gave me a reassuring smile as he walked toward me. "You okay?" I nodded, feeling the weight of everything still pressing on my chest. But as he stood there beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt all night. A sense of calm, a realization that I wasn't alone in this. "Carlos, it's time," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. "I'm done playing by their rules. I'm taking control." He nodded. "I've got the papers in the car. Let's do this." I looked at him, feeling a surge of strength. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. I walked back toward the ballroom, my mind made up. I wasn't walking away anymore. I was walking in, ready to take my power back. The guests in the ballroom watched me with a mix of curiosity and concern as I entered, their whispers filling the air. But I didn't care. I was done being invisible. Sylvia stood at the far side of the room, her arms crossed over her chest, that smug look still plastered on her face. She had no idea what was coming. I didn't waste time. I walked straight toward her, my heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. She looked up, her eyes narrowing when she saw the look on my face. "You thought you could break me," I said, my voice steady, each word coming out with more confidence than I'd ever had. "But you're wrong. I'm done playing your game." The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air. Sylvia opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not asking for your approval," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "I'm taking back what's mine, starting with this." I pulled out the papers from my bag, the eviction notice I'd gotten from Carlos. It was time to take control. The moment I walked back into the ballroom, everything seemed to shift. The air felt denser, thicker with tension. My footsteps echoed as I made my way across the polished marble floor, the guests' eyes following me. I didn't look at anyone, didn't need to. I was done playing their games, done being the quiet, passive mother. This was my moment, my decision. My first true step in reclaiming what was taken from me. I could feel the emotions bubbling inside me, anger, betrayal, but most of all, a sense of power. It was a quiet kind of power, one that didn't need to shout. I walked past the tables, the laughter and chatter now distant, muffled by the determination pounding in my chest. I wasn't the same woman I had been just an hour ago. My thoughts raced as I approached Sylvia. She was still seated, a smug smile on her face, talking animatedly with some of the other guests. She didn't see me coming, but I wasn't going to make a scene. No, I was going to handle this with the calm confidence that had been buried for so long. I reached the edge of the table and stood there, not saying a word at first. Sylvia finally looked up at me, her expression shifting slightly as she saw the determined look on my face. "You thought you could control me, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady but loud enough to be heard by the people around us. She scoffed, a dismissive look crossing her face. "You're ridiculous, Gail. This is my family now. You're just the old baggage we've been trying to get rid of." I could feel the anger rising, but I kept it in check. No more explosions. No more feeling like the victim. "You can try to push me out, but you will not control me," I said, my tone unwavering. "This is my life, my home. You won't take that from me." Sylvia leaned back in her chair, looking as if she were being inconvenienced by my words. "You think you can still control anything around here? What makes you think anyone still cares?" Her words were sharp, cutting, but they didn't land the way she expected. I wasn't the same woman who had let those words roll off her back for years. I was done. She was about to see that. From the corner of my eye, I saw Carlos walk into the room, his presence calm and commanding. He wasn't here for drama. He was here to settle this. I could feel Sylvia's confidence falter when she saw him. It was in the way she stopped speaking, the way her eyes darted to Harlan, searching for support. But he didn't look at her. He didn't even acknowledge the situation. He just stared off into space, pretending this wasn't happening. Carlos didn't waste time. He walked straight to me, pulling a briefcase from his side. As he opened it, I could see the legal papers inside. The moment had come. He turned to Sylvia, his voice calm, professional. "Gail is legally within her rights to reclaim her property, and this eviction notice is the first step. You have no claim here." The look on Sylvia's face was priceless. She tried to maintain her composure, but it was clear she wasn't ready for this. Her usual smugness melted away, replaced by a flicker of fear. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hands clenched into fists as she stared at the papers Carlos handed her. There was a moment of silence in the room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The guests were whispering, some looking uncomfortable, others watching with wide eyes. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It had escalated into something far bigger. Sylvia finally spoke, her voice shaky. "You think this means something? You think I'm going to let you win?" Carlos didn't flinch. "You've already lost, Sylvia. You can't control this anymore." And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time in years, I felt in control. I wasn't a victim of this family's chaos. I was the one holding the cards now. The room was still. Even the music from the band had softened, as if everything had come to a halt. Sylvia's mask of control had slipped, and now she was just a woman scrambling to save face in front of an audience. She looked to Harlan for support, but he remained motionless, unwilling to step in. This was it. The unraveling had begun. As if to punctuate the moment, Harlan stepped forward, his voice low, uncertain. "Mom, what are you doing?" I turned to him, the weight of everything crashing down. "I'm standing up for myself, Harlan. I'm done letting you and Sylvia control me. I've spent my life giving everything to this family, and what do I get in return? Betrayal." Silence. His face twisted in confusion, his eyes darting between me and Sylvia. "I don't understand. Why is this happening?" I shook my head, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You've chosen your side, Harlan. And now, so have I." He took a step back, the coldness in his eyes finally sinking in. There was no more warmth, no more understanding. Sylvia's grip on him had been too strong, and he was too weak to see it. "You can't just walk away from your family like this," Harlan whispered. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much I had sacrificed, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at him one last time and said, "You've made your choice, and so have I." The silence in the room grew heavier. Harlan's face was pale, torn between his wife and his mother. But there was no going back. I had crossed the line, and there was no erasing what had just happened. The chapter ended as I turned away from Harlan, the full weight of my actions settling in. I had made the decision. No matter how this played out, I was no longer going to be the quiet, passive woman I used to be. This was the beginning of something bigger. The weight of what had just transpired still clung to me as I stood there, the sound of the ballroom muffled around me. Carlos's presence beside me anchored me, but the world around me had shifted. The tension was palpable, thick with the quiet expectation that something was about to break. Sylvia, still seated at the table, was visibly shaken. I could see the shock in her eyes as she held the eviction notice in her hands, trembling. The smug confidence that had defined her only moments ago was nowhere to be seen. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was trying to find something to say, something that would allow her to regain control of the situation, but it was slipping away from her. The power was now in my hands. "This is my life, Sylvia," I said, the words steady but firm. "You will not control me anymore. This is my home, my decision, and you need to understand that." The guests, who had been watching in stunned silence, now seemed unsure how to react. Some shuffled uncomfortably in their seats, while others whispered amongst themselves. But nobody stepped forward, nobody intervened. They were too stunned, too unsure of what this moment meant. I realized then that I wasn't just standing up for myself, I was showing them something they hadn't expected to see: strength in the face of betrayal. Sylvia's hands were shaking, but her eyes narrowed in defiance as she finally found her voice. "You think this is going to change anything?" she spat, the venom in her tone clear. "You think some stupid piece of paper is going to make me leave?" She tossed the eviction notice aside, as though the legal right I held meant nothing, as though she had somehow regained control of the room with that simple gesture. But I knew she hadn't. She was floundering, trying to regain her footing in a situation she had never expected to find herself in. And then Harlan spoke up, his voice cold, detached. "Mom, this isn't necessary," he said, his gaze shifting between me and Sylvia. "We can work this out. We don't need to escalate things like this." I looked at him, the son I had raised, the man I had loved, and felt a deep, aching disappointment. Sylvia had worked her way into his mind, turning him against me, making him believe that I was the one in the wrong, but I wasn't the one who had betrayed. I wasn't the one who had disrespected, belittled, and manipulated for years. No, that was all her. "This isn't about working things out, Harlan," I said, my voice quieter now but full of resolve. "This is about respect. You have no idea what it's like to be treated like nothing in your own family. I've supported you. I've sacrificed for you. And you're standing here, defending the woman who has made it her mission to push me aside." His eyes flickered with guilt, but there was no apology in his voice. He didn't even look at me when he replied, "Mom, please, let it go." Let it go? The anger bubbled up inside me, hot and sharp, but I controlled it. I had learned to control it over the years, to swallow it down and bury it deep inside. But not anymore. Not today. Carlos, noticing the tension, stepped forward. His calm demeanor, his quiet confidence, was a stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded us. "This needs to stop," he said to Harlan, his voice cool, measured. "Your mother has every right to make these decisions, and if you can't respect that, then you're the one who needs to rethink your position." Carlos's words hung in the air like a final judgment. Harlan opened his mouth to protest, but Carlos's mere presence seemed to silence him. His gaze shifted to Sylvia, who was now standing, eyes wide, mouth agape. I watched as Sylvia's world began to unravel. She had always held the reins so tightly, manipulating everyone around her, but now, in front of a room full of people, her control was slipping. She tried to salvage her composure, but it was too late. "You don't get to make these decisions for me," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "I'm not going anywhere. I won't be intimidated." But her words held no weight now. I had taken my power back. This wasn't about intimidation. This was about standing up for what I had spent my whole life sacrificing for. "I'm not trying to intimidate you, Sylvia," I said, my tone softer but still unwavering. "I'm just telling you the truth. This is my house, my home. I'm done letting you control everything, done pretending I don't have a voice." The room was still. Guests exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether they were witnessing a family falling apart or the rise of something stronger. And then Sylvia cracked. She began to shout, her voice desperate now, trying to manipulate Harlan into taking her side once more. "You can't let her do this, Harlan. She's ruining everything. I need space. I need privacy." "You promised me." I couldn't listen to her anymore. I had heard these words for far too long. But now I was done being her punching bag. She was desperate. She could feel her grip on this family slipping away, and that terrified her. I took a step forward, my heart racing, but my body steady. You don't get to destroy everything I've worked for, Sylvia. Not anymore. Her eyes widened in shock. You think you've won? This isn't over. I met her gaze, calm and resolute. No, it's just beginning. But before she could retaliate, Carlos intervened again, his voice smooth and firm. I think we've all said enough for tonight. This situation can be handled the right way, legally. But for now, I think everyone needs to take a breath and step back. The tension in the room was thick, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Sylvia glared at me, fury in her eyes, but the anger was no longer directed solely at me. It was now mixed with fear. Her power had been shattered. I glanced at Harlan one last time. He stood there, frozen, torn between the woman he had chosen and the mother who had given him everything. But there was no real choice to be made. Not anymore. Sylvia's final words hung in the air like a warning. This isn't over, she spat. And as she turned away, I knew that no matter what she said, this chapter of my life was done. The next one was already beginning. The night was still, but my mind was in turmoil. After the confrontation, I needed a moment to breathe, to think. I stepped out of the ballroom and found myself in a quiet corner of the venue, away from the prying eyes. The sound of my heels echoed as I walked, a rhythmic reminder of what had just transpired. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me was now giving way to a deeper sense of exhaustion. I stood there, looking out at the distant lights of the parking lot. The weight of the eviction notice in my hand felt both heavy and strangely light, like it had already shifted the balance of power in a way I hadn't expected. Sylvia had been stunned. I could see it in her face. She hadn't expected me to stand my ground. She thought I was just a passive player in this family dynamic, but I had proven her wrong. Still, the victory felt hollow. This wasn't over. I knew it. Sylvia wasn't going to take this lying down. I had made a bold move, but it was only the beginning of the battle. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had no choice but to keep going. No matter what Sylvia had planned, I couldn't go back. I couldn't let her take control of my life anymore. As I stood there, I replayed the conversation in my head. How could Harlan, my own son, side with her? How had it come to this? I had given him everything, my love, my sacrifices, my loyalty, and now it seemed like it had all been in vain. He had taken her side, and that realization cut deeper than any slap Sylvia could have ever delivered. I wasn't ready to give up on him, though. I couldn't be. I had to confront him, to make him see how much pain I was in. But tonight wasn't the night for that. Tonight, I needed to gather my strength. Tomorrow, I would deal with Harlan. Tomorrow, I would stand up for myself in a way I never had before. I pulled my phone from my purse and dialed Carlos's number. The moment it rang, I felt the tension in my shoulders loosen, just a little. Carlos had been a constant in my life, a reminder that I wasn't alone. He understood. He knew what I was up against. Gail, he answered, his voice calm as always. I need you, I said, my voice steady but firm. This isn't over. I need to take the next step. There was a pause on the other end, but I could hear the reassurance in his voice when he replied, We'll do it the right way. You've got this. I'm here for you, Gail. The words were simple, but they meant everything. I wasn't alone in this. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the verge of something bigger than just surviving. I was starting to take control, not just of my home, but of my own life, and nothing, not even Sylvia, was going to stop me. As I walked back toward the ballroom, the weight of the eviction notice no longer felt like a burden. It felt like the first step toward regaining my power. Sylvia wouldn't win. She couldn't. When I entered the ballroom again, the eyes of the guests followed me. Some were curious, some uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I had already made my decision. I spotted Sylvia across the room, still sitting with Harlan. Her expression hadn't changed, but I could see the tension in her body, the way her hands were clenched around her glass. She was trying to keep up the facade, to maintain control, but I could see it slipping away. The longer I stood there, the more I realized that she was more vulnerable than she had ever been before. I didn't have time for her games. I had to act, and I had to act now. The time for waiting, for second-guessing myself, was over. I had stood up for myself once, and now I would make sure that Sylvia understood the full extent of my resolve. Carlos was right behind me, a quiet presence in the background, ready to step in if needed. I knew he had my back, and that made all the difference. The guests continued to whisper as I made my way towards Sylvia. I didn't look at Harlan, not yet. He wasn't the one I needed to confront. It was Sylvia. She didn't see me coming until I was right in front of her. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. "What do you want now, Gail?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I stood tall, feeling the power shift inside me. "I want you to understand that this is my house, my life, and I won't let you control it anymore." Her lips parted in disbelief, and for a moment I thought she might speak, but then she just smirked. "You think a piece of paper is going to change anything? You think you can just throw me out?" I didn't flinch. "I don't need to explain myself to you, Sylvia. I'm done being the victim. You've taken enough from me. Now it's my turn." The room had gone completely still, the whispers fading into a tense silence. I could feel all eyes on me, but I didn't care. This wasn't for them. This was for me. This was for the years I had spent being silent, being overlooked, being taken advantage of. Sylvia stood, her face flushed with anger. "You think you've won? This isn't over." I looked her squarely in the eye. "No, it's not. But I'm ready for whatever comes next." Just as the tension seemed to reach its peak, Carlos stepped forward, his calm demeanor cutting through the chaos. "This is enough for tonight," he said, his voice firm. "We'll deal with this the right way. Legally, Gail's made her decision, and it's final." Sylvia glared at him, still seething, but I could see the fear creeping in. She wasn't in control anymore, and that thought, for the first time, felt truly freeing. As Carlos stepped between us, I turned to Harlan. He was standing there, looking lost, torn between his loyalty to his wife and the mother who had given him everything. "This is your choice now, Harlan," I said, my voice low but clear. "You can either stand by her or you can stand by me, but you can't have both." He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood there, silent, just like I had been for far too long. And with that, I knew. The road ahead was long, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The phone call left a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. The voice on the other end was cold, full of hidden meaning, and dripping with a sense of inevitability. "It's not over yet, Gail," Sylvia's shadowy words echoed in my mind. "She has something up her sleeve." I stood alone in the darkening parking lot, away from the warmth of the wedding venue, where the night's celebration felt like a distant memory. The sound of distant chatter from inside the ballroom was muffled, as if the world around me had blurred into a haze. Sylvia wasn't done. That was clear, but neither was I. I wasn't the same woman I had been just hours ago, caught in a moment of anger and uncertainty. No, this time, there was a fire inside me, and I wasn't going to let it burn out. The old me, the one that silently suffered, had stepped aside. In its place, I felt something stronger, something that refused to back down. As I thought about the consequences of the day, about Sylvia's arrogance, about Harlan's indifference, my mind flashed back to all those years I'd spent pretending that everything was okay, suppressing the bitterness, the frustration, the resentment, and now, for the first time, I was letting it all go. I walked toward my car, but the journey felt different, each step firm and deliberate. I couldn't stay in that toxic atmosphere anymore. I had made my stand, but it wasn't enough. The battle had only just begun. It was time to take action, to stop waiting for someone to come and save me. Gail, the woman who had spent decades watching from the sidelines, was gone. She was replaced by someone who had had enough. Sylvia was right about one thing. This wasn't over. And it wouldn't be until I had what was rightfully mine. I needed Carlos. Arriving at my apartment, I grabbed my phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. Carlos answered on the second ring. His steady, reassuring voice was exactly what I needed. "You're not alone, Gail," he said, picking up on my tone. "This is just the beginning. Whatever comes next, we'll deal with it." I let his words settle in, feeling the weight of my decision finally start to sink in. For too long, I had been carrying everything alone, trying to make peace, trying to be the mother, the wife, the family matriarch. But peace had never been served to me. No more. Carlos had always been a lifeline, someone who understood when I didn't even understand myself. As I hung up the phone, I took a deep breath and stared out at the view from my apartment window. The lights of the city were a reminder that the world was still turning, still moving forward. And so was I. I heard a knock at the door, and when I opened it, Carlos was standing there, calm and ready for action. "You're not going to back down, are you?" he asked, a hint of admiration in his voice. "No," I said, my voice steady but fierce. "I'm done being passive. I'm done letting Sylvia control me. It's time to fight back." Carlos handed me a file, thick with papers that would ensure my rights were respected, that Sylvia couldn't just walk all over me. "You've already won, Gail," he said softly. "This is just about making sure they see it too." A small smile tugged at my lips. It felt good to hear that, to know that I wasn't alone in this fight. As the evening stretched into night, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about just standing up for myself. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost over the years. My power, my life, my dignity. And I was going to do it with or without anyone's approval. Later that night, I found myself back at the Royal Oaks Ballroom, watching from the outskirts. The sounds of celebration filled the air, but I was no longer part of that world. Sylvia and Harlan were deep in conversation, but I didn't care. It was time to confront her again. I took a deep breath before walking toward the pair. Sylvia looked up as I approached, the familiar smirk on her face, but it faltered when she saw the determination in my eyes. "You still think you've won?" she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "I don't need to win," I said, my voice cold and sure. "But I will no longer play by your rules." The silence between us was thick, like the air before a storm. Harlan stood at her side, looking uncomfortable but unwilling to pick a side. His eyes flickered between me and Sylvia, and I could see the doubt creeping in. But he said nothing. Sylvia's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a mocking grin. "You think you can just throw me out and get away with it? You've lost." I didn't flinch. "I've been silent for too long. Not anymore." Sylvia opened her mouth to retort, but I cut her off. "You've manipulated Harlan for years, but you won't manipulate me." "I am done." Her face twisted in disbelief as she took a step back, but I wasn't done. "You may have torn my family apart," I said, my voice rising with every word, "but I'll be damned if I let you take my life from me too." There was a moment of hesitation before Sylvia shot me one last glare, her fists clenched at her sides. "You think you've won? You haven't seen the last of me." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd said everything that needed to be said. Turning away, I walked back through the ballroom, my head held high. The guests watched me, some in stunned silence, others murmuring amongst themselves. But I didn't care. This was my turning point. Sylvia had no more power over me, and Harlan, well, he'd have to make his choice. But one thing was certain. I wasn't waiting for anyone to save me anymore. I had saved myself. The next day, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sylvia's words from last night still lingered in my mind. "You think you've won, but you haven't seen the last of me." She had said it with such venom, her voice dripping with the kind of malice that left no room for doubt. She wasn't done, and neither was I. I woke up early, my mind already racing through the possibilities of what Sylvia might do next. Her threat had only solidified my resolve. The time for playing nice was over. I couldn't stand by and let her continue to control everything, especially not my family. Harlan, my son, was still trapped in the middle, a pawn in Sylvia's game, and that's where the real danger lay. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out the window, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. For so long, I had allowed myself to be silenced. I had been the dutiful mother, the supportive wife. But it was clear now, being silent hadn't protected me. It hadn't kept my family intact. If anything, it had only allowed Sylvia to take more, to push me further to the edge. But now, things had changed. The phone rang, cutting through the silence of the room. I picked it up before the second ring. It was Carlos. "Gail," he said, his voice steady. "I've been going through some of the legal paperwork. Sylvia won't win this, but we have to act fast." His words were a comfort, but they also reminded me of the war ahead. Sylvia wasn't going to sit back and let this go without a fight. I was ready for that fight. More than ready. Later that morning, I found myself standing in front of the Royal Oaks ballroom once again. I had been avoiding it, but today, I needed to face what was coming. Sylvia was lurking in the background, her plan unfolding in the shadows, but today, she wouldn't get away with it. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me as I entered the ballroom. Some were sympathetic, others curious, but all of them were aware that something had shifted. I was no longer the quiet, accommodating mother-in-law. No, I was someone else now, someone who had decided that enough was enough. The moment I stepped into the room, Sylvia locked eyes with me. Her smug expression faltered just for a second, but it was enough to let me know that she knew what was coming. She wasn't in control anymore. She stood up, her posture straight and commanding, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "What do you want now?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. I didn't answer her immediately. I just walked over to her, every step measured, my confidence growing with every breath I took. "You've been playing your games, Sylvia," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But it's over now." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can just walk in here and turn everything around?" she hissed. "You've made a mistake. You've humiliated me in front of everyone." I smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "No, Sylvia. What you did last night, that was humiliation. And you didn't just humiliate me. You humiliated this entire family." She took a step toward me, but I stood my ground. "You may have tried to tear this family apart, but I'm done being your victim." Sylvia opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. "You've made a big mistake underestimating me," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "And I'm not going anywhere. This is my life, my home, and I'm taking it back." Her face turned red with anger, but I could see the fear creeping in. Sylvia knew she was losing her grip. She had pushed too far this time. Harlan was standing nearby, watching the confrontation unfold, but he didn't step forward. He didn't speak up. He just stood there, torn between the two women he loved. His silence cut deeper than any words could. "You know," I said to Sylvia, my gaze shifting to Harlan for just a moment, "this isn't about you or me anymore. It's about him. You've manipulated him for years, and he's too scared to even make a decision." Sylvia's gaze flicked to Harlan, and for a moment I saw the cracks in her armor. She wasn't as invincible as she liked to believe. "You think you've won?" she spat, her voice laced with venom. I didn't flinch. "I don't need to win," I said, my voice steady. "But I will no longer let you dictate my life. You've been using Harlan, manipulating him for your own gain. That ends today." She sneered, trying to regain her composure. "You think you've done something big, but you haven't. This isn't over, Gail." I stood tall, my eyes unwavering. "No, Sylvia, it's over. You just don't know it yet." The room was heavy with tension, and as I turned away from her, I caught a glimpse of Harlan's conflicted expression. He wasn't even looking at me now. It was like he was shutting me out, choosing the easier route, the path of least resistance. "Mom." Harlan's voice was soft, but it was there, cutting through the tension. I don't know what to say. I didn't want to hear his excuses. Not now. Not after everything. "You need to decide, Harlan," I said, my voice steady, but my heart heavy. "You've been torn between me and her for too long. It's time for you to make a choice. You can't sit on the sidelines anymore." Harlan looked away, his eyes darting from me to Sylvia, then back to the ground. I saw the guilt in his eyes, But it didn't matter anymore. This is your battle now, I continued. But I'm done holding this family together for you. You need to choose. Either you're with me or you're with her. But you can't have it both ways. I turned to walk away, but the pain in my chest was too much to ignore. I had always been there for him, always tried to be the strong one. But now, I had to let go. I heard his voice again, softer this time. Mom, I don't know if I can do this. And for the first time, I didn't have the answer. I didn't know if we could come back from this. I stood in my apartment, the same place where I'd once felt safe, now a battleground in a war I didn't ask for. The phone call from Carlos this morning had shaken me. He'd found something huge. Sylvia's manipulative games weren't as clever as she thought. She had left behind traces, digital evidence of her schemes, and now I had the proof I needed to put an end to this. The recording was damning. Sylvia had never intended to let me live in peace. She had planned to take over the estate, to force me out of my own home. I held the evidence in my hands, a small file that could turn the tide of everything. It wasn't just a document, it was my redemption. I couldn't wait anymore. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about taking back control of my life, my home, my dignity. Sylvia had underestimated me, and now I had her on tape. I stood in the courtroom, the weight of what was about to unfold pressing down on me. Sylvia sat across from me, her usual air of smugness replaced by a flicker of unease. Her lawyer was by her side, ready to fight, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was armed with the truth. Family members, both mine and Harlan's, filled the seats in the gallery, watching as this bitter dispute played out in front of them. They whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of the chaos. But none of them could see what I had seen for years, Sylvia's true colors. Today, they would finally understand. The judge called the court to order, and the tension in the room tightened. Sylvia tried to look confident, but I could tell that she was rattled. She wasn't in control anymore. You may proceed, Mrs. Walker, the judge said, nodding to my lawyer. Carlos stood up, his calm demeanor reassuring. He spoke with authority, presenting the case, the documents, the evidence that Sylvia had carefully hidden. The recording was played aloud, filling the room with Sylvia's voice as she spoke about evicting me, about using my son to manipulate the entire situation. There was no denying it. Sylvia's web of lies had been exposed for all to see. Sylvia's face turned red, her lips curling into a snarl. "This is an outright attack on my character," she shouted, trying to regain control of the situation. The room grew silent. The whispers intensified. Harlan sat at the back, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. He looked torn, as if he still couldn't believe what was unfolding in front of him. But Sylvia wasn't finished. "She's manipulated all of you. She's turned my son against me. This is all her doing." Her words were desperate, but they fell flat. I could see the doubt in the eyes of the family members who had once stood by her. I stood firm, my gaze never wavering. "No, Sylvia. The truth is out now," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You've been lying to all of us for years. You used my son, you used me, and now you want to take everything. But it ends today." The judge called for order as Sylvia's lawyer tried to interject, but I had the upper hand. The truth had been spoken, and no one could deny it. Sylvia's reaction was explosive. She stood up, throwing her chair back, and slammed her fist onto the table. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning. You have no idea what I can do." Her words were filled with venom, but I didn't flinch. "I've heard enough," I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of everything I had endured. "The truth is undeniable. You've lost." The judge banged his gavel, signaling the end of this first round. But Sylvia's fury wasn't over. She glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. She had never expected this turn of events. I had played the game better than she ever could have imagined. As we left the courtroom, I saw Harlan standing outside, his eyes filled with confusion and regret. He didn't approach me, but I could feel his gaze on me, searching for answers. I had done it. I had exposed Sylvia, but the war wasn't over. Sylvia was still dangerous, and now Harlan's betrayal weighed heavily on me. Later that evening, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the adrenaline from the courtroom fading, leaving a hollow feeling in its wake. I had won a battle, but the war wasn't over. Sylvia would keep fighting. And Harlan? He was lost, caught between the woman he had married and the mother who had loved him unconditionally. I couldn't make him choose, but I couldn't keep carrying him either. It hurt, more than I had expected. I thought he would stand by me, but he didn't. He never truly saw the manipulation, the control Sylvia had over him. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Carlos standing there, his expression serious but supportive. "You did good today," he said, "but it's not over yet. Sylvia won't back down so easily. We need to keep moving forward." I nodded, steeling myself for what was coming. Sylvia would never stop. But now, neither would I. The phone rang again, and I knew immediately it was Harlan. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom." His voice was quiet, hesitant. I know, Harlan." I cut him off, my voice tight. "I know what you're going through, but you need to understand, I won't be your backup anymore. You have to make your choices. I've been there for you. Now it's time for you to stand up for what's right." He didn't answer immediately, and I knew he was struggling with guilt. But there was nothing left to say. Not yet. I hung up, my heart heavy with the weight of everything. This battle was far from over. But one thing was certain. My fight had only just begun. The soft hum of the city outside my window felt like the calm after a storm. My apartment, once filled with tension and anger, now felt oddly quiet. The courtroom battle had ended, but its echoes reverberated through my mind. Sylvia had been exposed. The family dynamics had shifted, but it wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It wasn't as simple as just winning a legal battle. The emotional scars, the betrayal, and the strain with Harlan, those were the things that couldn't be resolved with a court ruling. I sat on the couch, the legal papers spread out before me. The case was over, and I had come out on top. But the weight of what I'd lost was undeniable. Family, trust. The years I'd spent being controlled, manipulated, too afraid to fight back. That had been my reality. But no longer. Now, as the quiet settled in, I couldn't shake the thought that the real battle was ahead. It wasn't over yet. I had regained control of my life, but the fractures in my family weren't going to heal overnight. I hadn't seen Harlan in days. We'd exchanged a few words at the courthouse, but nothing substantial, nothing real. He was still tangled in the mess Sylvia had created, and I wasn't sure if he was capable of getting out of it. But there was something I needed to do. I needed to face him, to confront the years of silence, of his choices. It wasn't about forgiving him or fixing things right away. It was about taking the first step in rebuilding what had been broken. We met in a small cafe near my apartment, a neutral place. Harlan looked worn, the weight of everything pressing on him. His eyes were tired, haunted. I hadn't seen him like this before. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said as soon as he sat down, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I don't know how to make this right, but I need you to know that I regret how I treated you." It hit me, hearing those words. For years, I'd waited for him to see the truth, for him to understand how much he had hurt me. But here we were, finally, no longer dancing around the pain. "I'm not looking for an apology, Harlan," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking. "I'm looking for trust, for you to see what you've been doing and how you've let her manipulate everything. I don't need you to defend her anymore." He hung his head. "I see it now. I was blind. I didn't see it, not until it was too late. But I'm not blind anymore. I see everything now, and I've been wrong." His words, the regret, it was real, but it wasn't enough. I could see that he wanted to make it right, but the road back wouldn't be smooth. He had to prove it, and I couldn't just welcome him back without knowing for sure that he understood the damage he'd done. "You've got to be willing to fight for us, Harlan," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You've got to make your choice. And you've got to stop letting her control you. That's the only way forward." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. It hurt to see him like this, but at least it was real. At least it was a step in the right direction. Sylvia was no longer the same woman she'd been when she first walked into my life. Her arrogance had crumbled, her power had shattered, and now she was nothing more than a bitter woman trying to cling to what was left of her control. I could see it in her eyes when we crossed paths. She was trying to hold herself together, but the damage was done. When she came to see me again, it wasn't to apologize. It wasn't to make amends. It was to manipulate, to convince me that we could work things out. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the one she could bend to her will. I never wanted things to get this far, Sylvia said, her voice soft, almost pleading. This fight, it's tearing everything apart. We're family. Don't you want peace? I met her gaze without flinching. You had your chance, Sylvia. You've torn this family apart with your lies, your manipulation. You don't get to play the victim anymore. It's over. Her eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else too, something I had never seen before. Vulnerability, a crack in her perfect facade. But it didn't matter, not anymore. You can't just walk away from this, she hissed. This isn't over. I stood up, meeting her stare one last time. It is for me. It's over. The finality in my words hung in the air as I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sylvia's games were over, and so was her hold over me. The family dinner was awkward, tense. We all sat around the table, trying to navigate the space between us. No one spoke of the court case or the drama that had unfolded in front of them. There was an unspoken agreement that we were all here to just breathe, to live in the aftermath of what had been. It wasn't perfect. The cracks in the family weren't suddenly going to disappear, but there was an unspoken understanding. We were all hurting. We were all broken in some way. But maybe, just maybe, we could start healing together. Harlan spoke up at one point, his voice hesitant. I know I've messed up. I've done things that I can never take back. But I want to try. I want to fix things, with you, Mom. I don't know how, but I'm willing to fight for us. It was the first time in a long while that I'd heard those words. It wasn't an instant fix, and I didn't expect it to be, but it was a start. The next few days were quiet, but in a way that felt right. I had won my battle. Sylvia was out of my life, and Harlan was starting to understand what he'd been blind to. I wasn't sure where we would go from here, but for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I took a walk through the park one evening, just to clear my head. The trees were starting to bud, and the air smelled fresh, full of promise. It was a reminder that life goes on, no matter how hard things get. I was still figuring things out, still learning how to rebuild, how to move forward. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. I had taken back control, and that was all that mattered. Looking ahead, I knew the road wouldn't be easy. There would still be struggles, still be challenges, but for the first time, I felt ready to face them. This was my life now, my future, and I was no longer afraid to take the next step. There was still so much to rebuild, but I had the strength to do it. And that was a feeling I would carry with me every step of the way.